Hello everyone and welcome to Waffle Flower Crafts. It's Shannon here, and in today's technique video, I'll be showing you how to create a gatefold card with a slide out message. I'll be using these Waffle Flower products today. First up is the Envelope or Hug stamp set. This is a really sweet set illustrated by Helen Dardik and just came out in our spring release. I love the images and I'm going to be using the matching dies as well. I'll also be using the A2 grid panel to create a track for my slide out message, and I'll create a little pull tab using the pull tab die. So here are a couple examples of the cards we'll be creating today. This card was made with the Envelope or Coffee stamp set, and you can see how the front of the card is split down the middle. This is the gatefold. It is a shutter-like opening to the front of the card. As you can see, I also used the matching Envelope or Coffee die to cut out the negative for that beautiful image that's watercolored in the center, so you can see it in the front as well as the inside of the card. And since there's not a lot of room, since most of the card, the inside of the card space is taken up by that image, I did create a slider message pull tab. And here's the second card that I created. Same card style except for a different image. This image is from the Envelope or Me stamp set, and there's that slide message so you can have a little bit more space to write your message. Just because the image takes up a lot of space on the inside of the card where you typically would write your message. Okay, so I'm going to start by stamping this image from the Envelope or Hug stamp set with a very light distress ink. I'm using a light ink because I'm going to do no line watercoloring. I'm stamping this image a couple times on some watercolor paper. This is Channin cold press watercolor paper. So before I actually get into my no line watercoloring, I'm going to color in her skin a little bit. I have some of the Tattered Rose smooshed onto this plastic here. I'm just mixing it with a little bit of water and coloring in her skin. Typically people use antique linen to stamp their image when they do no line watercoloring, but I'm using Tombow dual brush pens today to do my no line coloring, and I don't have a very good skin tone color. So I decided I could use this Tattered Rose to kind of color in her skin today. So here is a Tombow dual brush pen. It has two sides. I'm using the brush tip side today. I'm going to do a very simple no line watercoloring technique to color in this image. I learned this from Nina. I'm going to use, however, my Tombow dual brush pens to color this in. And the reason why this is so simple is all I'm doing is going right over the stamped lines with the marker. That's all I'm doing. Except for right there, I did color in towards the tail end of the bird a little bit more of the image with the pen, but that's just so I can create a gradation over his belly, just because there's so much white space on his body. But for the rest of the images, the wings, the flowers, the leaves, everything else, I just go straight over the lines with one of the colored pens. So it's very, very simple. I really enjoyed this technique. It takes a lot of the guesswork or questioning out of no line watercoloring, because all you're doing here is just tracing over the stamp lines. So really, really simple. And I was just so blown away by the results, especially after seeing some of the beautiful cards that Nina created with this technique. It's just such a great way to add a whole bunch of color into a stamped image, and it really is very, very easy to do. And if you haven't seen any of Helen Dardik's original artworks or watercolors, you really should hop over to her Instagram, because her original works are very colorful and just so beautiful. And I kind of feel like this technique is a very kind of shortcut way to kind of get some of that beauty yourself into these stamped images. So I am almost done here. All the colors that I'm using, by the way, are on the screen. They've been on the screen at the lower right corner from the beginning, so you can kind of follow along if you have Tombow dual brush pens at home. So I'm just about done here tracing this image, finishing up her hair. Once I'm done completely tracing this image, that's when I will really start to incorporate the watercolor part, because I will take just a brush and some water and go over all my lines and that will kind of reactivate that ink, and then I'll pull that ink around and kind of fill in or color in the white negative space. So I'm using a number 1 brush here, just some water. Really don't need a lot of water for this, and I'm going to start right here at the tail end where I really colored in a little bit more of the image, and you can see how the water activates that ink, gets that ink starting to move and flow, and then I'm carrying it along the rest of the body of the bird to kind of color in this bird and give him this beautiful kind of maroon purple color all over his body. I will continue this process, reactivating the ink, moving the ink around to kind of fill in the negative space for the rest of the parts of this image. I'm going to play a little music and meet you guys back at the end when I'm just about done. Okay, so I'm back. I'm almost done here. I do take a little bit of that ink that I reactivated, and I do color outside of the lines on some of the leaves and berries, especially those blueberries. You can kind of see it just creates like a little bit of a halo, and it just gives you a little bit more color. So I went ahead and used the matching die and die cut out that image, and I have also taken the A2 grid panel die and die cut this panel out of 110-pound white cardstock. Now I'm going to take a T-ruler, and using the lines on my grid work surface, I'm going to just trace at the bottom a 1/2 inch from the exterior edge over into the inside. Now I'm going to use my scissors and just snip right there at that 1/2 inch mark, and then I will go ahead and cut out the interior grid of this panel. Then I'll throw that away. What's remaining is going to be the track for my slider message. This panel right here is going to be where you would write your message, so the actual message part. The dimensions are on screen. It is 3 7/8 by 3.5. I started writing it on the panel here, and then I decided I didn't need to do that. Then from the top, I'm going to trace in 1/2 inch from the edge in, and now I'm going to trim down 1/8 of an inch off of both of the sides. So I'm cutting off of the long sides here. So I went ahead and used my paper trimmer and just trimmed down a 1/8 of an inch, and now I'm going to use my scissors to just trim off the rest. This will basically be like a very, very wide T, and this top part here, the top of the T, is what's going to catch on that little lip left on the grid panel. So you'll catch right there, and that's what will hold it in place so it doesn't fall out of the card. So now moving on to my card base. This is just your standard A2 side folding card base. So it is 5.5 by 8.5, and I am scoring at 2 1/8 on both sides of this card base. This is what creates that gate fold. So once I've scored, I will actually fold it and press it down with my folder, and you can see the gatefold right there, that shutter-like opening. Now I'm going to move on to kind of adding the color panels. So I have two panels that are at 5.5 by 2 1/8, and then I have my back panel, which is a typical A2 panel, 5.5 by 4 1/4. I'm now going to take one of the dies from the Pull Tabs die set and cut out a little notch out of the colored panel and out of the card base. This is just going to be a little spot, or it's going to make it a little easier to grab a hold of that slider message and pull it out. I'm going to die cut these both at the same time, so I have them layered on top. I've got the colored panel right on top of the card base. I use a little purple tape to hold the die in place, and then I just ran it through my die cutting machine, and the die will cut out that little notch out of both the panel and the card base. So now that I got those both done, I'm ready to really start to put this whole card together. The first thing I'm going to do is adhere these colored panels onto the front of my card. I'm just using a tape runner to adhere these down. I really want this to have I want all of this panel to be stuck down, so because I'm going to be die cutting the matching enveloper hugs image out of the front, so I really want that paper to be really stuck all over. So now I'm going to center this die, and I'm going to tape only half of it, so I'm only taping one of the flaps down, and then I'm opening it up, and then I will run it through my die cutting machine, and that will cut half of the front, and then I will fold it back up again here, and I will take this die once I remove the I remove that purple tape and the negative that's still inside the die. Now I've closed my card back up. I'm going to pop that die right in, nestle it right into the cut space, and then use some of the purple tape to hold it down on the half that I didn't die cut. This is how you make sure that your die cut cuts perfectly on something like a split panel. So now that my front is cut, I'm going to move on to making the back, or constructing the slider message on the back side of the card. So I flipped my card over, and now I'm adhering that grid panel right onto the back side. I'm using some liquid glue to do this, and I'm lining it up, making sure that the edges of the panel line up with the back of the card. I'm going to move on to now adhering that rectangle that's up in the upper right corner of the screen here. That's just one of the pieces that is cut from when you use the A2 grid panel. I'm just going to pop that in place. It just gives the backside a little bit more support. Now I'm going to put glue all over this grid panel. I'm not putting any glue on that actual slider message part, because that needs to move freely. And then I will take this colored panel and just pop it right on the back and press all over and make sure it has a nice good hold. Just pulling out a couple times, make sure it is pulling cleanly, coming through easily so there's no glue. I'm going to take that watercolored image and put some liquid glue on the back side of it, and then I will hold down the flaps of my card and center that image inside the negative space. Now that I have my image glued down, I'm ready to finish up my card with my sentiment. I'm going to have basically a two-part sentiment. The front will say "Sending you," and then the inside will say "Hugs and Prayers." I'm going to ink this up with VersaFine Onyx Black, and this sentiment is from the enveloper hug stamp set, so the same stamp set that the image is from. So it's a really great, a really sweet sentiment to go with this really sweet image. And again, inking it up with VersaFine Onyx Black and just stamping it on the inside of the card. And now this card is all done. I'll hold it up to the camera so you can see everything a little bit closer. So we have that gatefold where it opens kind of like shutters, and you can see the image on the front and on the inside because we die cut it out using the matching die. And we also have this sliding message, which I forgot to show you, but I'll show you in just a second here. So here's one of the other cards that I made. This same process, I just used a different image. That image with the beautiful girl and in the envelope is from Enveloper Me. And there you go. Now I'm pulling out the slider message so you have more room to write your message, especially necessary for this image and the bird image, just because they're so large. This just gives you a little bit more room to write whatever you want to say to the recipient. So I hope you guys enjoyed these cards today. If you want any more information on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.